All right, so I'm very excited to announce the Dragon's Den, which will be happening today for the very first time in our Friedman conference. The Atlas Network is generously providing us $5,000 for a team that can pitch a good enough idea of campaigning for liberty on campus or wherever, just campaigning for liberty. So so it's kind of run like a Shark Tank, where we have each team pitching their idea to a panel of distinguished judges who will be asking the tough questions and making sure that the team has enough rigorous planning and has the and has enough. Has what they need to actually execute their plan. So I will first off introduce our judges who are in the room at present. And yes, so they are some of the most distinguished leaders in the global landscape for liberty. They have led taxpayer advocacy groups, and they have basically encouraged a whole generation to defend and protect our liberties. So we have Matthew Sinclair, who was the former executive director for the UK Taxpayers Alliance, and he has, if you haven't already seen him in action yesterday with campaign grassroots training, he has been one of the most effective campaigners for that. And next to him we have Jordan Williams, who is the executive director of the New Zealand Taxpayers Union, and he has been a staunch advocate for taxpayers' rights and has successfully led the organisation since 2013. And then we have Ron Manners, who is standing ovation already. He is the executive director of Mannkal Education Group, and has completely led a new generation of people with education and leadership and training. So first of all, a round of applause to these three fine judges. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce and just one more announcement. The winner is going to be announced tonight, and to keep the suspense rolling. So we have, without further ado, we have Jack McGuire, who is in Queensland University of Technology, and he has done a lot of campaigning in the past. And yeah, so I'll set him up on stage and he can introduce himself.
Cheers, thanks very much. So yeah, my background, I was tied up with the QT Student Guild for 3 years, which we imposed that cap so you couldn't go more than 3 years. So I was there for the full 3 years, saw a hell of a lot, which is sort of, I guess, where this came from, and now I'm sort of the director, I guess you'd say, of the Australian Students Association. So the Australian Students Association, as I said, came about through my years of being at the QT Guild and every year being hit up by the NUS for $80,000 a year for affiliation fees. Now, we throw a toga party at QT that has a world record for the most people at a toga party, and $80,000 could host that toga party 10 times over, and we turn a profit from that. So it's just ridiculous. You get nothing from it. I even went down to the NUS President's Conference, and they were boasting about how they had given $200,000 of students' money to federal election campaigns promoting the Labor Party. So not even necessarily just left-wing causes, just the Labor Party. So I thought that was outrageous, and what do you do? Queensland, I think, has a pretty good record. Roger and I are in the back. Rather than sitting around moaning, get up and do something. So that's what I did, start up the Australian Students Association as an alternative union. Now, I honestly believe that alternative unions have the capacity to be the catalyst to cause serious fundamental change to our political landscape at the moment. Unions, as they currently stand, are monopolies, and allows them to create super profits. Those super profits go directly, they either go into paying organisers $300,000 a year, or they go into the Labor Party and funding left-wing causes, and not representing and advocating workers, which is what it should be doing. So what we are proposing to do is set up alternative unions to give workers choice and put some competition into that marketplace so that you can have unions like ours, which don't don't make ourselves out to be political at all. In fact, we're avowedly apolitical, never give money to politics. Our aim is to defund the left-wing unions by beating them with competition and having sleeker organisations. Which allows us to be competitive, and we can offer our prices as our alternative unions at sort of under half the price. But with the ASA, it's a completely different model. It's purely about service, fee for service rather than affiliation fee, which I'll explain later. And I'll explain why it's better for the fee for better for outcomes for members. Sorry. So the Australian National Union students. A couple of quick things about the funny acronym. They fly for starters, but they actually fly their representatives from university to university during student election campaigns. So they take funding from all students, and then they fly from student election to student election to try and rig the elections to make sure their mates win, which is absolutely atrocious. As I said, they gave $200,000 federal election campaign. Down the bottom there's someone burning an effigy of then Prime Minister John Howard. They have really violent protests. Now this was actually one of the stories about why I got involved with politics in the first, or student politics in the first place. It was one of those fables that were told that back in the day, so the story goes, at the UQ University Union, when the socialists were in charge, they paid a friend of theirs $40,000 to write a research report into reclaiming that word there, the C word. As part of that research report, they all sat around in a circle with mirrors and quilted pictures of their genitals. And I thought, well, that is outrageous. They spent $40,000 on a quilt. But I thought, well, it couldn't actually possibly be true. During my year as president, we went down to the women's room and it was just like a complete mess. They had a 5-litre jar of custard. I didn't even know you could get that, with like a massive crust on it, like really, really gross. Going through this box, pulling out, like chastity belts, and there was like a women's swimming costume with blood in the crotch, and then found the quilt. So it's like a relic, and I was really pleased to find that. But anyway, so we keep that now, and that's a regular story, and we roll it out. So the Australian Students Association, it's purely about fee for services. Our services are designed to save student unions money, but also increase their service provision levels so that they can actually do more good for students. We don't take any money for affiliation. So if we are to take money from you, you're getting a good service from us. We are undermining the NUS essentially with capitalism, which is great, I think. We upskill individual union office bearers is another point of differentiation between us. They go around, hog all the media, and it's great for them, the NUS, and they're so unwieldy and they're not directly representative because the average student can't vote them out. So we go around, we host conferences, etc., to upskill them, make them be able to have a bigger voice in the media, how to run a campaign, and how to do a media release, etc. And that allows them to be even more active themselves. And if they campaign on something ridiculous, they'll get booted out by their student unions, and just creates a better sort of environment, I guess. And I'll explain how just the QUT Guild, some of the really cool stuff that we did on our own, and we didn't need the National Union of Students at all. So one of our objectives is to try and get rid of the student services amenities fee, which is, of course, thank you, which is a compulsory student unionism, but just rebranded. So unions are still getting huge amounts of money, and it's not working. So what we wanted, I flew down to Canberra off my own bat a few times to try and lobby politicians. It's very expensive. So our goal at the moment is to try and build capacity so that we don't need to keep using my money to fly down to Canberra, but build an organisation that has these long-term revenue streams that can keep funding people for years to come to do their own campaigning, their own lobbying, and hopefully create some change. So we've got some very specific goals after the session yesterday with Matt. So we want to replace the NUS or have more unions affiliated to the ASA or subscribing to the ASA by 2018. So very short turnaround, and we'll be successful very quickly. And as part of that, we also want to try and upskill and train freedom-loving students to win more unions. because at the moment we're actually having the most successful period that we've ever had in history in winning student unions for freedom-loving students, which is great. But we need to bunker down because we've already lost a couple. So our incumbency is not great. So we need to train people how to keep their unions. The ASA conference we actually had last week, and it's a shame because I wish it was next week because that would be what I'd be pitching today. But essentially we had two big focuses. One was directors' duties and board training, and the other one was media training, how to get in the media and how to run a campaign, which obviously you come away with skills and it's very relevant. One of our big achievements was that we actually matched the number of students that attended in our very first year, and it was a comparison to the NUS President's Summit. So that's us there with the Education Minister, Simon Birmingham, who came along, which was great. And here's some of the campaign ideas that we came up with, very mainstream. So we've had as Corey Bernardi and Erica Betts told us, who crossed the floor for us on this issue, in 20 years of Parliament, they said they hadn't seen a reaction like it. So we went and we didn't bother talking to the Liberals because we thought that they should be on side with this. They got rid of it in the first place. We then went and spoke to the crossbench twice, and we spoke to the National Party. Everyone in the National Party thought it was a good idea, our proposal, which was just to have a referendum on campus. Then we went and spoke to except for a couple of people, Barnaby Joyce and Fiona Nash, then we went and spoke to the crossbench, and we got 6 out of the 8 to co-sign a bill which gave it safe passage. Anyway, so it ended up with a massive split between the Libs and the Nats. Every single Liberal senator left the room, which apparently was unprecedented, which is kind of cool that one union did that and just a couple of people being a bit cheeky. So what will the grant be used on? The problem is that we have freedom-loving students who are not competitive enough in student elections. The NUS is the natural go-to for media comments, and we don't have an organisation that can continually fund students to win elections. So how do you change that? We need to upskill freedom-loving students, we need to start selling services to unions and universities to secure long-term revenue streams, and we need a membership drive to get more credibility than the NUS in 12 months. So I propose to do a tour to every capital city to, as Austin and Judd said yesterday, spread liberty. The risks. Do you think you'll really be able to upskill students? Well, in our first year, we lost by 50 votes, which is a pretty good outcome to come in and get 50% of the vote straight off the bat, or just under. In 2015, we had 73% of the popular vote, and last year we were elected unopposed in all but 4 positions, and then in the end we won everything, which is just unbelievable. And I think it's the first time in freedom-loving students' history that that's ever happened. So really good victory for us. Will universities really purchase your services? Well, ask Louis. He's from Murdoch, and he's the president there. He came to our conference last week, and I think he is actually keen to do it. So one of the big services, and they're in the booklet there, some of our services that we provide, graphic design outsourced to the Philippines. The 24-hour hotline is a 24-hour staffed hotline with a 1-800 number attached to it. At QUT we did that. We had a 7-fold increase in engagement, and most unions should be able to save about $60,000 a year in shaving a staff member. So massive increase in engagement, which obviously helps in winning an election, but then also saving big cash for them. And in Canberra, it took us 2 face-to-face meetings. So we've had 1 face-to-face meeting with this conference. We need a follow-up to be able to commit pen to paper and actually get some of these contracts up and running. So the optimistic outcome is to have, about $6,000 worth of startup fees from these student unions, and then an ongoing revenue of about, $300 times 6. I want to win 2 more student unions, and I want to train people in incumbency, and obviously surpass the amount of student unions affiliated. I won't have time to talk about our other alternative union, which is in the works, but it will sort of aid this anyhow. And if successful, this $5,000 going towards the tour, and the budgets are in front of you, should actually generate far more than $5,000. And if that is the case, I think this is a fantastic thing, what you're doing here with the Dragon's Den. I'd love to come back and sponsor perhaps a runner-up prize next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack, for that brilliant presentation. Obviously, upskilling freedom-loving students and keeping student unions accountable is one of the most important tasks we can engage in to spread liberty. So now I'm handing it over to our panel of judges to ask 10 minutes worth of vigorous questions and seeing how Jack will execute this.
Hello, Jack. Matt Sinclair. Just wanted, what you say, surpass the number of unions that affiliate to the NUS by 2018 is your goal. How's the decision made to affiliate to ASA rather than AMUS?
Well, yeah, not making a shitty decision. No, so it goes to the executive, and this is actually really horrible the way the NUS is set up. If you affiliate to the NUS, it's a decision made by the executive of the university union. If you want to leave the NUS, then you actually have to have a campus referendum where at least 50% of the students vote. So it's actually really hard not to affiliate, but it's mostly just in terms of money. So if they just don't give money to the NUS, which of course is a decision of the executive, and then we would go around and join us for $1, and then if you actually want to sponsor us financially, well then now we can start looking at some services and providing some real benefits to students.
So just one quick follow-up, which is why you seem to be covering a lot of universities in this tour.
Yep.
What's the argument for covering a lot of universities versus concentrating your resources on a smaller number in order to hit your concentrating more effort on a smaller number of universities in order to get that win? What leads? This seems like a relatively broad approach.
Yep.
Why not more focus?
Sure. So I've spent probably 3-4 years now in this space. In the last couple of years, really investigating the structures of these various student associations and unions, and some of them it just does your head in. Some are set up, by legislation. Some are body corporates. Some are, just associations. Some of the university, whatever, and they all have various levels of oversight by the university and various, funding streams. They might have, like QUT, $10 million in the bank account and have an operating budget of $6 million a year, or they might be like University of Southern Queensland, where they get a $3,000 SAF grant a year from the university. So really, you do need to go broad strokes, and the broad stroke idea is to pick up all those university unions who are independents, who don't engage with us or the NUS, because no one ever goes to them, and students are very apathetic, and particularly when they're in these student associations. Some of them don't get paid, so they spend all their time studying, etc. So you really need someone in their face saying, look, this is why you need to do it, this is a great idea, look, I'm here now, let's just put pen to paper, even if it's just to affiliate for $1, it won't cost you anything, and we won't be silly in the media like the NUS are.
Jordan Williams, if you are successful in getting a number of unions to affiliate with the ASA, and then the majority of those unions are taken back over by the left, what prevents, or what is the legal structure of your organisation to prevent the ASA being taken over by the enemy?
Sure. So I was actually really fortunate 2 years ago when I sort of started setting this up in the first place. Had a bit of an in-kind grant from Alex Butterworth, who's a trademark lawyer, and we went through the Constitution rigorously, and it's now sort of split up. So there's a commercial wing which engages in all the contracts and things, so that can't be ripped up and go to rack and ruin. And then there's also a representative association wing, and we've got founding members, and all the founding members are solid people. So it's sort of anti-stacking is put in there anyway. But as I said, the goal of the association isn't necessarily to be an activist voice in the media. It's to train and upskill those independent and right-wing or freedom-aligned unions, and not do that for the left.
Jack, are you an engineering student?
No, but I do love beer.
I thought you might be. I'm an engineer, and I tell you, we're hopeless at putting presentations together.
And I don't have an artistic eye.
And I'm saying this in all seriousness because what you have there is so important. It deserves. I think when you talk, if you're selling a project to say 3 guys like he, always think in mind that we're balancing 2 phone calls. We've got 2 incoming phone calls. We've got a screen full of emails we haven't unanswered, and we've got a plan to catch in 10 minutes. So you've got to put your punchline right up the front, and the punchline has got to tell us that we can't live without it. And then you can give us all the detail. You gave us all the detail, but I didn't know where you were going. But I know where you're going now. Get the punchline up the front, because what you're doing is very valuable, and how we ever let the Liberal Party bring back compulsory unionism, I'll never know.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
I was wondering so you've got a few universities listed here, and I won't list them all now, but I'm sure the audience knows them better than I do. Which of these universities do you think is going to be hardest to win over, and which do you think is going to be easiest to win over, and how kind of hard or easy would you describe some of these? Because if it's, almost if all it takes is a quick conversation and the service sells itself, there's Skype and, there's saving $5,000, what level of difficulty are you looking at to these universities as sellers, do you think?
So I tried to phone call the University of Sunshine Coast probably a dozen times in the lead up to this conference to get them to try and come along. They just would not engage. And then I got a Facebook message from the fellow on the day of the event and said, look, I'm really sorry, we would be really interested in it next year, some excuse. So you just got to get in their face. Like, you have to be there in front of them, particularly then if you want to upsell and get a service going, you have to be there. You can't do a Skype call, you have to be in person. It took me two trips down to Canberra to get the University of Canberra to sign up to our hotline, which is up and running, and that would never have happened over the phone. It has to be, like I said, just apathy, people get worried about, so I don't know what it is. In terms of the universities that would be easiest, I think that there's probably going to be some uptake at Murdoch, University Union, the Guild, Wollongong, University of Tasmania really want to come on board, Adelaide University Union, so there's some really big university unions there that are keen. The hardest ones will be the lesser known ones that are very small and sometimes very heavily regulated by the university, which the NUS can't get either. And Victoria, I don't know, Victoria just seems like a bit of a political basket case. I don't know, when it comes to student politics, you can't. I think that'll be a bit of a skinny tour going down there. But in terms of making them competitive and being able to run those sessions, you kind of have to do that and get them in a room like this as well to run those sessions.
I just want to ask some questions around your personnel and longevity. Who, as an example, you've got as the services, you've got payroll, and with some of these back office functions, correct me if I'm wrong, but back office functions that student unions can outsource to you. Who's actually doing that?
It's all outsourced. Everything that we do is outsourced again. So we're sort of a bit of a middleman.
So by collaborating the various contracts, you'd hope to have an efficiency, be able to...
Absolutely. It's like a purchasing group, I guess, and everything, a lot of the work gets outsourced through Upwork, I think it is now, like freelancer.
What year are you?
What year am I? At university?
Yeah, 11.
No, I'm in my 6th year of a 5.5 year degree. But I've been working full-time my whole degree, so I've been productive.
If we choose to give you $5,000 tonight, what guarantee do we have that when you are poached by PwC or whoever takes you on next year, clearly an entrepreneur, that this will still exist in 12 months or 2 years' time?
Yep, so the commercial wing, as outlined in some of the documents I gave you, can just be passed on, and that's a constant revenue stream gathering enterprise, and that funds the association side to the association. And it could fund whoever it wants to fund, really, but it's basically set up there as like a freedom fund to donate to people who are keen. And the first cabs off the rank will be those people that put forward a serious case that they do want to be competitive in a student union election, and we'd fund them or help them with some money if they need it. I study law and finance. I don't want to work in a bank, and I don't want to be a lawyer. So I want to start up my business or run an alternative union. So the one that I really want to spend all my time on anyway, which I can't talk about today, is that one at the end there, which is the Coles Workers Enterprise Association, which is an alternative union to the SDA. And the SDA make $70 million a year, and we want to try and get 10% of their market share.
I bet you're getting a lot of support from Students for Liberty and the how IPA has got a students coordinator at various universities. You're making full use of their contacts, aren't you? No,
I'm not, because that is definitely something I need to do. Okay. But I haven't.
That's why they're there.
Yeah.
If you can if they can stimulate the students, they're already doing that, and what you're doing is so complementary.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'll take that on board. It has been, this has sort of been a bit of a side project for me rather than a full-time job, but yeah, no, I definitely think there are some things I need to do, and that's probably one of them.
So, if you look at this sort of 5 years down the line,
Yep.
you know, are there any other services you'd like to bring in, any ways you'd like to change it? Like, once you've got to that point of being competitive with the NUS, where would you like to see it go next?
Well, there is no NUS.
Yeah.
Over in the UK, 2 years ago, I was over in the UK, and I met up with the Irish president of the National Union of Students. He's funnily enough a good guy. Raving trot, but a good guy. Spoke to him, and he was saying it's actually really hard for us to remain relevant to our student unions. We're asking for all these huge affiliation fees. We're not giving them anything. And I said, well, we got all these services. Why don't you just bulk purchase our services, and you can go from there and provide them. So that's potentially one way of expanding overseas. It'll probably won't mean great things for you guys overseas just yet, but it'll mean that we'll have a heap more money to fund our guys.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much for that, Jack. And so now we'll be progressing to the next entrant, which was a wild card entry from yesterday's grassroots campaign training with Matthew Sinclair, and it's on the abolition of the luxury car tax. So I'll let them introduce themselves, but I know that they are from Mannkal. So.
Hi, my name is Kat Slack. I'm here as a Mannkal scholar, currently doing a Master of International Relations at UWA.
Hi, my name's Lou Cross. I'm a Mannkal scholar as well. I'm an engineering commerce student at Curtin, and looking forward to this.
And my name is Rob McLeod, and I actually work for Mannkal, and I'm a recently graduated Masters of IR student as well. Yeah. You go, Rob.
Well, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Dragons. Our presentation, our campaign pitch is on why we should abolish the luxury car tax. Well, why does the tax need to go? It's unnecessary, obsolete, it's outdated, and it's a rational tax, actually. It's a protectionist measure. Protectionist measures, as we know, are always paid by the consumer, not paid by the producer of the good. It makes goods more expensive for Australian consumers, reduces their purchasing power. It forces Australian consumers to pay higher prices for their vehicles that fall over a certain threshold. It dissuades Australians from actually buying more expensive green vehicles, which are more efficient. It dissuades them from buying new vehicles as well. Newer vehicles that are more efficient, that have greater safety ratings, often more expensive, and this is a disincentive for Australians to purchase these vehicles. It also was originally brought in as a protectionist measure to protect Australian manufacturers of vehicles, which by the end of 2017 we will have none. So we should probably get rid of it. I'd like you to think about what group of Australians you think might pay the greatest burden of the tax. In the next slide, we have a VW multivan, we have a Toyota Tarago, and we have a BMW 22i convertible. Have a little think for a second and think about which car attracts the luxury car tax. Yep, we're going to, just for a raise of hands, the VW multivan. Few people. Toyota Tarago. Few people. And the BMW convertible. Few as well. Two of them attract the luxury car tax. It's the VW multivan and the Toyota Tarago. Funnily enough, the BMW luxury convertible doesn't attract the car tax. I'll pass you on to Rob, who's going to talk about supporting evidence.
Just that one, right? So, funnily enough, the biggest amount of LCT that is actually paid on a brand in Australia is actually Toyota. So it's higher than Audi, it's higher than Mercedes, and it's higher than BMW as well. The other funny thing is that the GST can actually push the price of the car into the threshold of qualifying for the luxury car tax. So you've heard that here first, ladies and gentlemen. A government tax can actually qualify you for paying more government tax. I think it's pretty clever, to be brutally honest, but so as we were saying before, the biggest offenders are the Toyota Tarago, the VW Multivan and the Nissan Patrol. They attract the most common costs of LCT. And I don't know about you guys, but when I think of a luxury car, I think of a minivan with like 7 kids in the back, all screaming and throwing stuff. And that's just, yeah, fantastic. Even proponents who would support this sort of protectionism or this sort of taxation and then try to defend it by saying, there are government subsidies which are then paid back out to the people for people who have work vehicles or farmers that need these vehicles for certain country trips. Well, we would say, what is the point of taxing these people if you're then just going to give the money back? And most work vehicles, big trucks, do fall under the category of having this tax as well. Also the fact that it punishes people for choosing to be environmentally conscious. As Lou was saying, new models often have better emissions targets even than the previous year's model. They're often safer, and on top of that they usually mean that it's a better outcome for both the consumer and the environment as well. And then on top of that, it is something that the consumer can do in order to express their need to make a difference in the world for the environment. And the fact that the government actually punishes you for deciding that you want an expensive, albeit much cleaner and safer car, we think is just pretty disgraceful, to be honest. There's going to be about 100,000 cars in Australia this year, which are going to attract that tax. And you must remember that's not 100,000 individuals, that is 100,000 families, that is 100,000 farmers, that is 100,000 people that want to use this for recreation, take their family camping, take their friends down south. That's what this is for. This isn't going after the businessman or business lady who's got change to spare and she's looking to get a luxury car. And finally, as Lou said before, our car manufacturing will be gone by the end of this year. Ford shut down last year, Toyota and Holden will be gone by December of this year. So, we believe we have quite a potent campaign strategy for this. We believe it's important because we have a simple message for people to have, and then we also believe that our message can be accompanied by quite powerful and, again, simple images in order to get this meaning across. So firstly, it's stealing from families. Like I said, it's not going after people with high-end sports cars. It's going after the mum that needs a Tarago to take her 4 kids and their several friends to soccer practice. It's going after the country family that needs to go and drive from their remote station 400 kilometres across their own station into town to try and get something to help out their work. We also think that visually as well, this campaign lends itself to a couple of very, we think, potent and funny ideas. So the first main idea that we had for advertising would be viral campaigns. So these would be viral video campaigns, something that's just short, can be shared on Facebook, can be posted on YouTube, can even be run on TV if it's popular enough, like some other ads have actually gone and done. So the first one we came up with, and probably our most prominent one, would be a car dragging around an extra 1/3 of the car that it actually would have paid for with that tax. The next one would be comparing different car models and the different emissions that they have, and how a cheaper car model blowing out more emissions, blowing out pitch black smoke out of its tailpipe is suddenly the cheaper option because of this car tax. And then finally, really reinforcing the fact that the government is punishing you for making a good choice as a consumer and making a choice that is quite often important to the consumers themselves. The next policy we would have would be physical stunts. So we've got 2 main ones. So the first one would be sort of like a city square curtain game show. So we'd have a city square, have 3 curtains set up. Behind each curtain would be the exact same model of car, except one curtain would just be one model of car. The next one would be a model of car with a briefcase full of cash. And the third one would be a model of car with plane tickets. And when we ask people which one they would like if they choose it, we would hope, and I think most people would realise why there is just one car on its own, and we would tell them that is the status quo. That is what you would be paying for under the current model. And then finally, we might do a similar game to the one that we played with you earlier today about which one is the luxury car and which one you think would incur the tax. We also believe that some of the most effective ways to reach people through advertising is through tangible advertising, so physical material, and as Matthew was saying in the talk yesterday, the longevity of stickers and other material that you see on other cars, even long after the campaign is finished, is so important, and we believe that there are important systems in place through which we can already harness these techniques. So to give example, bumper stickers and key rings, quintessential car traits. When people go to buy a new car, if it's a car that attracts the luxury tax, we can hook one of these keychains on that set of car keys, and as soon as they get it, they see that they've immediately paid all this extra money on top of it for their Tarago. Billboards, placards, other signage, we believe that dealers would go out of their way in order to get behind this to make their products more affordable, considering it's not extra money that's going to the dealers, it's extra money that they're just passing on the cost of. And then finally, we thought we'd go for a nice, fun hashtag. So hashtag MyLuxury. So MyLuxury could have been a trip overseas, some more units at university, a new car or a new jet ski. And finally, why we believe this is so important, because we believe it's a really achievable goal. We believe that we can do this within a realistic time frame. By December this year, all of the car companies, all of the car manufacturing would have been shut down, and we believe that this could be in time then for the budget in May of 2018. And why? Because it's a simple idea, it's a simple cut, it's just a tax cut. And on top of that, it's a tax cut that frees up money from families, frees up money from farmers, frees up money from workers. On top of that, there aren't any other sort of replacement legislations or anything that you have to sell to the public in order to get this across. It's not like in New Zealand where they increased the GST and they had to offset it with cuts to income tax in order to placate individuals. And finally, because there is no conceivable industry or group that we can think of that would actually oppose such a measure. And that's why we're proud to propose.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that presentation. And what I really think is so important about that is it helps bring society just one step closer to luxury, which is brilliant. So, unfortunately, due to timing, we're just going to limit the questions to one per judge, so 3 questions, just to keep up with timing.
You're here to convince us to give you $5,000, but I haven't seen a budget on what you're going to spend the $5,000 on.
We were actually thinking of sending 10 more scholar Mannkal schools to Friedman. We were actually planning to send 10 more scholars to Friedman next year, and that's what we're going to do with a bunch of. Sorry, just had to make the joke because Ron was in the panel. Most of the advertising most of the budget would probably go into the viral videos. It's not really distribution that we think that we would need most of the money. The sort of ideas that we were thinking in terms of the mock-up for the ads, in terms of like the model extra third of the car or getting the old models, I think this is stuff that we could do quite cheaply, even possibly for free, especially if we spoke to car dealers and proposed to them how this would actually affect their business models as well. In terms of the cost of the stickers and that sort of thing as well, they are still quite cheap to print, so we believe that handing out that paraphernalia would be quite easy. And again, we do it through the existing systems of the car dealerships. Oh, and the racetracks as well were the other thing that we were going to do, plaster the racetracks and these sorts of ideas, because it's quite a popular thing, particularly in Western Australia.
Who's the team to deliver this project? And are you going to be, in order to have some of the sort of infrastructure and things like that, are you going to work with any of the existing organisations out there? What's your kind of plan to deliver this campaign as a team?
Well, we know that the LDP is interested in removing the luxury car tax as well, so we were thinking maybe we could get in contact. We're all from WA, we were thinking getting in contact with Connor Whittle from the LDP and a few other people over there, and hopefully teaming up with them to sort of pitch that. And then also they've got obviously David Lionhelm in Parliament, maybe he could apply a bit of pressure. We were hoping to also contact Steve Chobo and sort of apply a bit of pressure there, the Trade Minister. In terms of who would actually be running the project, we assumed we'd be doing it ourselves. Yeah.
What a fine project and a fine team presenting it too, I say. But this, I think you're right, the angle is right to approach it with humour, because it is comical, isn't it, protecting an industry that's vanishing. But it reminds me of the old Australian, it was an Australian whiskey called Corio, made here many years ago. And the imported, the proper whiskies from the rest of the world were hit with a tremendous duty to protect this local Corio, which was totally undrinkable. And it was Peter Samuel, writing in a monthly magazine, highlighted the absurdity of it all, that Corio whiskey hadn't been made for 10 years, but the tariffs still existed, and the Corio people used the argument that it was still on the shelves of the shops, so that it still had to be protected. And this reporter responded, and he said, and it will still be on the shelves in 100 years' time.
Just one quick, sorry, can I quick follow-up? Would there be a concern if you were to work, sort of have the LDP take the lead on this in Parliament, that Liberal and other party groups would be more cautious about endorsing the idea? I don't know. It's not.
It sort of depends. One of the other campaign ideas we were thinking of floating around would be making a collage of ministers who will drive cars that would attract the luxury tax, and then making an association with them and plastering it all over social media, because we think that the tax sort of still exists in that classic Australian top poppy sort of syndrome, in the sense that it's just like a more luxurious item should be taxed to make it more in line with the rest of the nation. So I think that if we put that up and showed everyone regardless, I think there would be pressure from a lot of constituents.
What is the average? You've set the levels it kicks in. What's the total amount collected by the tax? Well, give us an example of a vehicle worth, say, $100,000. What's the tax attracted?
So the multivan is $91,000, and that was a base price of.
Yeah, the multivan attracts, I think, $8,000 tax on the $91,000 car, and the like a new Tesla Model 3, I think it is, $112,000 car, $10,900, I think, if that is tax. Oh, just the luxury tax, or that doesn't include the GST and other costs like that, yeah.
Great. Excellent and tough questions. All right, so round of applause for our team. And our next team is from Murdoch Students for Liberty, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Yeah, we have that issue in the UK too.
Hi, so we're Murdoch Students for Liberty. Our campaign is about free speech and promoting free speech on campuses. So we all hear about the situation of free speech in American colleges, and with their no platform policies and protests which disrupt guest lecturers. If the situation doesn't change on campuses soon, the anti-free speech cancer will spread further, infecting American society as a whole. Here in Australia, the situation is quite similar, as we have seen recently with Sydney Uni Conservative Club's difficulty screening the Red Pill documentary. The Institute of Public Affairs recently conducted a review into the status of free speech in Australian universities, with only the University of New England showing a strong track record of upholding it. Murdoch University presented as being one of the worst campuses, and it is our mission to transform this image with a greater vision of seeing this transformation spread to other universities. We want to ensure that students obtain a worthwhile learning experience, which can only be facilitated by the free flowing of ideas. We want to see the establishment of a free speech officer in the Student Guild, and also a disclaimer in uni acceptance letters, which highlights the university's commitment to open debate, even over topics considered as being controversial. In order to gain momentum for achieving this, we must first highlight the importance of free speech amongst students, And this is how we're going to allocate $5,000 towards this goal.
Hi, I'm Mitchell Hazelby from Murdoch as well. So we've planned a series of events that cement the importance of free speech to the university. 3 events will take place if we're successful. First, we plan to host a screening of the Red Pill documentary. This will incur costs for licensing, food and room hire. Second, organising a controversial guest speaker. This will include a contribution towards their travel and accommodation. Possible speakers we're looking at is former Chief Justice Robert French on the topic of 18C, Bettina Arndt, who writes for The Australian and talks about men's issues, or Callum Wade on 18C and his experience with it. Third, we want to organise a debate focusing on trigger warnings and whether they're an appropriate tool for universities. This will include Murdoch students with external guest speakers. We're looking at Scott Ludlam and Lorraine Finlay. We plan on allocating $1,500 on the events which highlight the importance of free speech, and a further $300 will be allocated to Facebook advertising targeting Murdoch students. This is due to the uni restricting advertising on campus.
Hi again. So we plan on building a wall, and this grant is going to pay for it. We expect this wall will cost $1,000, and the chalkboard wall will be placed in a central location on campus and will be a safe space for people to write whatever they like. Nothing will be out of bounds. It'll be totally anonymous and totally free for students. Build the wall.
Okay, my name is Tom and I'm going to talk about Free Speech Day. It has recently come to our attention that Murdoch has a policy in which students are liable to a $50 fine if they offend somebody on campus. This fine is inherently ridiculous. Offence is not defined in the policy as such. It is left to the discretion of those enacting it upon somebody who they have deemed as giving offence to them. So if I was to say something controversial, as I often do, and you took offence, you could go to the administration, complain, and I would be charged $50 for offending you and upsetting you. It's ridiculous. We propose that a free speech day be held on campus, in which we encourage students to say anything that they want and to wear controversial clothing. Freedom of Speech Day is something that we want to not just stay at Murdoch, but to bring to the wider community in Australia at large. With Freedom of Speech Day, we want to bring controversial speakers to campus, encourage debate for students and to say whatever they want in the name of freedom of speech. If we are given the opportunity to use the $5,000 grant, we want to take $1,000 of it to pay for the fines of every student who upsets somebody on our campus. Thank you very much, guys.
Hello all, my name is Heath, I'm doing merchandise apparently. We intend to allocate the remaining $1,200 on merchandise, which will further draw attention to the campaign. Things we aim to have would be t-shirts, stickers, badges, bottle openers, and of course posters. We've a number of slogans which include, but are not limited to, free speech costs nothing, censorship costs everything. I like my tax status like I like my speech, free. The only free things communists don't like is speech. Just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. And of course, build the wall. In addition to this, we sort of hope that these emotive and humorous messages will sort of continue our campaign, as we've seen throughout America particularly, and with Brexit and now with the French elections, that the use of humour, the use of memes, it brings us all together and it gets young people engaged in these debates and discussions, and that's really what we want. Build the wall.
Yeah. Ooh. Okay.
I, as the first non-socialist Murdoch Guild president in 20 years, will support this student interest. The end goal is obviously to get rid of the fine, ensuring freedom of discussion stays on campus, or comes back at least, bringing the matter to the university senate and insisting that students care about freedom of speech. Thank you, and let Murdoch speak.
Thank you very much, guys, and I really like how your aim is to make freedom of speech great again. So that's awesome. Our last round of questions.
Did it worry you at all? Oh, sorry. Okay, so do you worry at all that this might just be wildly counterproductive? And in that, your strategy, I completely see the injustice. $50 fines for anything is outrageous, no? But it strikes me getting really controversial speakers in will increase the sort of volume of the debate about free speech. But if you're then associating it with very unpopular politics, i.e. Trump, if you have a load of things out there like a free speech wall, which by its definition you can't control, and someone's going to write something fucking horrible on it, I get that you've made a point, but have you just made a very reasonable point about free speech seem like it's an awful product of awful people, right? I just kind of worry that what you're doing here is you're going to draw a lot of attention to the issue, but you're going to make these ridiculous anti-free speech rules seem more reasonable, not less.
I'd probably feel
Just go for the mic.
I think we all probably have an answer. Look, at the end of the day, there's no such thing as bad publicity, and it's not necessarily having unpopular views. You'll notice that we said Scott Ludlam is one. If you don't know, he's a Green senator from Western Australia. It's more or less to allow the debate. Of course, there's a bit of hyperbole in the presentation. We are having a joke to some things. We're bringing the idea of Trump as the humour to get people involved because it gets people interested, and that's what we want. We want to have that discussion, and then we bring in people. We say controversial speakers, yes, but it's not for the sake of controversy. It's for bringing in these ideas and having a proper discussion about them. That's why we have people from the left, people from the right, and we argue the toss of why these things are great and why we should have them or why we shouldn't have them. It's about discussion. Thank you.
Again, the great team. I don't think it's works. It is. No, you know. There must be something.
Battery must be good.
Jump up. Yeah. I'll just speak up. Nobody can hear. I think you're right. The point made. You've got to be a little bit careful about that thing can get out of control. But the theme, and if you can focus on the humour again, you'll capture the whole spirit. And that university you've got needs a clean, straight up and down. It's got to be aired. It's got to be brought out. And if you can do it with humour and totally control the content, but make it look as though you're not controlling it.
Well, humour is obviously a big part of freedom of speech. It's something that binds us all together and something that everybody can laugh at and love. I personally love British humour, if you couldn't tell by the accent. But we want to have those unpopular opinions filtered because, as the saying goes, sunlight is the best disinfectant. If you have an unpopular opinion and you have an opinion that's overtly racist, such as Nazism, what you can do is then you can use the freedom of speech that we want to protect to take that ideal apart, to shred it like nobody has ever done before. That's the beauty of the freedom of speech wall and the freedom of speech day, because you're going to get idiots who are going to say racist things and stupid things, but what you can do is use the same principle of freedom of speech to take them apart. That's the beauty of it. It's open discussion, and that's how you get those opinions in the place where they belong, which is unpopular and not right. So freedom of speech, although we don't want to hear these unpleasant opinions, we have to have them because it reminds us that all opinions are welcome and all opinions are are not necessarily relevant but should be heard, and that's where you can use humour to combat that kind of stuff and really connect with the everyday student and even the everyday professor. It might seem a little bit far-fetched that we could bring some lecturers onto our side, but you never know.
Also, chalk is easily rubbed out.
That's censorship.
It's really just a monitor blog, just in that sense.
Well, that's two questions. Firstly, have you had a discussion, where would you draw the line on this free speech billboard? Chalkboard. Because if I was your enemy, I'd be going so far as to, you'd be writing slut-shaming things up there or whatever. So where would you draw the line, given that you're the campaign telling other people they have to put up with offensive things? And the second question is, you mentioned, gentlemen, something about an advertising ban on campus. I wonder whether you might expand on that and ask whether, and my question is, have you considered using that as your tool to promote more popular messages that the university is banning, rather than going to from an ideological point of view, the logical conclusion about offensive messages?
All right, I think it's in a way frivolous to have a point where we go, oh, we're going to censor it if we don't like it. This is not unusual to Murdoch University. We've actually had a chalkboard in the past. Essentially, as my learned colleague may have said, that sunlight sort of is the best disinfectant. As I said as well, chalk is easily removed. At the end of the day, I find it very unlikely if people are to do these things. And I don't think anonymity is really going to stop anybody from saying mean things anyway. I think, please do not quote me, but I think it may have been Edmund Burke, I'm probably wrong, who said that a man has a right to say whatever he pleases, but another man has a right to knock him down for that. And if you want to write slut-shaming things, if you have said, another person can say, well, whoever wrote that is a dickhead. And so they are for having such a feeble idea of using free speech for that. But that is the beauty of free speech. You can say ridiculous things or you can say profound things. It's the freeness to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know the full details on the advertising ban, but with your feedback, we're happy to modify it slightly to include it, or maybe focus on that more, because it sounds like a good idea.
I think it's private, outside of official events, private companies and such are allowed to advertise on. Yeah, I can use the microphone.
One more question. Why would you respond if someone were to say to you, you don't really want free speech, you want crazy right-wing people to be able to speak their mind more freely? Why aren't there any, extreme pornographers on this, free speech campaign? Or why aren't there, radical, smash the state terrorists on this? Why aren't there Islamists? Why aren't you putting Abu whatever up on this thing?
Well, I'd love to. I'd love to contact Abu. Look, our personal politics, of course, our personal politics do differ a little bit. I mean, we're all libertarian. We're all pro freedom of speech. We're all pro libertarian. But me as a conservative and others as sort of slightly right wing, slightly left wing. You have to ask them on their personal views. However, I encourage anybody with any view to come to the Free Speech Wall or the Free Speech Day to talk about it. And there's an abundance of Islamists and lefties on Murdoch campus. It's the most left-wing university that has the most left-wing student body in the state. It's quite a thing to see. What I would say is anybody can come to the Free Speech Day or the Free Speech Wall. That is the point, that you have all views. Just because we're all slightly right-leaning on this council, I don't think it makes too much of a difference.
I think the main important thing with this campaign too is opening up the discussion on why we need free speech on campus in the first place, so at least the discussion will be started. And if there are any Islamists that want to come and talk at our uni, bring it on, weed them out, and then we can debate them.
Yeah, that's true. That's not all you could do.
Well, that wraps up our Dragon's Den session, and and the winners will be announced tonight at the gala dinner. So make sure you are there for that. And yeah, a round of applause to our distinguished judges.